tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutang dhammang sanghang namasami. So one of the ongoing themes that I'm still working on, I guess, is how we interpret the Buddha's teachings. We have inherited these timeless teachings from the Buddha, but of course, one of the challenges is how we use them, which requires us to be able to understand them. It requires some interpretation sometimes. I mean, the Buddha was talking to people in 6th century BCE India, and he had to use the local language and the concepts then that were familiar then, but nowadays a lot of that's changed. Even though the truth is universal, but how it is presented changes over time. Even in the course of a generation or so, language changes. Sometimes I say things and I realize that people don't understand me because I'm speaking, Canadian, 20th century. Not that old, but. And when I was writing another book previously, and one of my editors would sometimes say to me, "Oh, that word was last used in the 17th century," And I thought, what? I read too many old English classics. This was last used by Charles Dickens, this word. But of course, we all understand that the words are not the experience. They're just the signposts, but if you get the wrong signposts, you end up at the wrong place, right? Now you end up in Mangrove Mountain or Wiseman's Ferry. You end up at the lock gate, dead end or something. So some people, they have their particular concepts. We all have concepts about Buddhism, and some of them are, we can say, better informed than others. Sometimes these concepts are quite old. Maybe we received them when we're children. Some people grew up with Buddhist concepts, Buddhist culture. They receive these teachings when they're young children. And just like if people ask me about certain things about Christianity, I have a very childish view of Christianity. I recognize that because that's where I learned about Buddhist Christianity when I was a child. But it's a bit old-fashioned now. We were in Switzerland one time. This Sri Lankan woman turned up at the door, and because we had our sign out for the monastery, it's called Dhammapala. So we had a sign outside, out on the streets, to guide people from the train station to the monastery because it's a bit complicated. So, so she's walking around. Her husband had a house there, a holiday house in this village. So she's walking around the village and she saw Dhammapala. That doesn't sound Swiss. That sounds sort of Buddhist, So she followed the signs to our front door, and it doesn't even look like a Buddhist monastery. It looks like a Swiss chalet, because we can't change the outside appearance. They've changed it a bit. There's a Buddha statue in the front garden, but in those days we didn't. It was hard. We're sort of incognito, hiding away in the Swiss Alps. Anyway, she found us and she came and talked to us. And I thought it was very strange, some of the ideas she had about Buddhism. And I realized that she had learned Buddhism when she was a child. So she had these very childish attitudes about Buddhism. And I learned Buddhism when I'm mature. When I was at university in the 20s, not 1820s. I mean, when I was 20 years old. I mean, so I missed all that childish view of Buddhism. All these Jataka stories and all this. I don't even know the Jataka stories. I'm sure you do. You probably know some Jataka stories. Visantara and these stories of the Buddha's early life, past lives and things. They're 10, 500 past lives. He's older than you think. He's been around a long time. Okay, 10 famous Jataka stories. Anyway, I don't know those things, but she was telling me all these Jataka stories, and I didn't even heard of them. Some of them, I didn't even know that was Buddhism. But she was very interested anyway. She was a very intelligent person, so she wanted to learn. But it was like we're talking two different languages about Buddhism, about two different languages. Even though we're both speaking English, but but some of these, especially when we first learn about Buddhism, many of these are like the foundation of our education. Sometimes we're still holding on to them, these beliefs. When you talk to people about karma, for example, and they still talk about past lives, ghosts, and all this stuff. And karma means action. What we're doing right now is kamma. It's not past lives. It's not old stuff. It's right now. When you talk about old influences, it's vipaka, resultant. But people still, it's my karma, my kamma. And Buddha said, you can't say that. You don't know what the kamma vipaka, the results of previous action, are unthinkable, the Buddha said. Inconceivable. Where we're acting all the time, and there's so many influences and counter influences. You can't say, I got a sore knee now because I kicked a arahant in the last life or something. You can't say that. You want a simple answer, but it doesn't work that way. It's very complicated. But of course, when you're a young child, you want a simple answer. And probably your parents, they realize, if they say, well, why do people get sick? And they say bad karma. That's what they say, right? Probably. Yeah. So they just have a simple answer, but it's not quite right. It's not quite, correct according to the more refined understanding of Buddhist principles. So there was one woman who came to my retreat, a Thai woman who came to my retreat in Switzerland, and she had. How do I make a long story short? She had an accident while she was in England studying, got hit by a car. And she interpreted this to be her bad karma, see? Because she had kind of misled her parents to be able to send her to England to study English, you see. She said, if you send me to England to study English, I'll be able to run the business. She had no interest in running the business at all. But she wanted to get away from the family, so go to England. make a pretense of studying English. Then she got hit by a car, and she thought this was the payback, you see. And I said, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. That's who knows what it is. Maybe just your lack of mindfulness crossing the street, this was in England, so she looked the wrong way, you see. Whether they say look left or right or I forget too. Left? When you cross the street? You drive on the left here or the right? Well, no, it's the same as Australia, isn't it? Yeah, so, but not North America or Europe. You go to England and you got to think backwards. Cars come from this side, not that side. But it's the same in Thailand anyway, isn't it? They drive the same way as England. Yeah. But just lack of mindfulness maybe. But she thought, oh, it's bad karma. And I said, well, you come to the retreat now and you're to make good karma. She said, no. I've been kind of, what do you say? Not blessed, but condemned, cursed, for my whole life. I said, no, you're making karma right now. And she just wouldn't believe it. Just wouldn't believe it. She had this belief that it was past karma, the result of past actions. And she just couldn't get it out of her mind, so. And much as I, was very convincing, even if it was the result of past actions, you do more karma, good karma right now, and to counter it, you can change it. But she had this view that is fixed. But if you believe in that, you can't ever be enlightened. Then you can never practice to liberation, because you're a prisoner of your past. Then, if you think you have to experience all the results of your past action, forget it right now. It's too much. But some of the karma you do, like meditation, it kind of lightens up that self which is still clinging to that previous result. You get more an attenuated sense of a self. When you recognize, there is no fixed self here, it's just feelings, states of mind, sensations in the body. Who is experiencing past actions? There is no who there. Just sensations, feelings, states of mind, and they arise and they pass, and they arise and they pass. So you still have to, in a sense, experience the results, but they're so attenuated. It's like they're not stuck on a fixed entity. They're much more loose and fluid. So maybe there is some, maybe you get a rather than you get a serious illness, you just get a light one, because you aren't grasping onto that old karma, that old self that has that karma stuck to it. Got that? It's very subtle. And if you're still holding on to your old views, then very hard to understand it. We have this teaching of the Eightfold Path, for example. The Eightfold Path, right? And when we first start off, we have a concept about it, right? We just have some idea, When my first experience of Buddhism was in a meditation center. I didn't know anything about Buddhism, which is probably a great benefit. Because my mind can conceptualize quite a lot, you see. But the teacher just said, sit down, watch your breath. So it was very simple, the exercise. I mean, doing it was something different. Doing it was not easy. But I didn't think about it too much. Just sit there, try and watch the breath wander off. Watch the breath wander off. Watch the breath wander. Breath. More wandering than breath, but and I was able to have an experience of a reasonable peace of mind, reasonable state of peaceful mind. Yeah. So, but next time, after that, I went to learn about Buddhism. Then I went to Thailand. And when I'm sitting in a meditation center, the monastery there, trying to meditate, so is this the first noble truth? Is this the second noble truth? Is this first jhana? Is this second jhana? All these Buddhist concepts clogged my mind. And the mind was you can say it was skillfully unpeaceful. At least I wasn't thinking about traveling. I was thinking about, is this the first noble truth or the second noble truth? But it still was thinking, all these concepts now were in the way. And the result of it was, first of all, was getting very, very confused. Because, the concepts are quite different than the experience. And, I was so used to concepts, especially being at university for many years, that I didn't know about experience. I didn't know the differentiation between experience and the concept. But in meditation, it's all about trying to get to the direct experience. You still have the concept, if you like, as a signpost or guiding you in the right direction. But so it's helpful to have this guideline, the Eightfold Path. What am I doing here? Right, the Eightfold Path, right? But rather than sitting here being eaten by mosquitoes and chewed on by ants, I'm practicing the Eightfold Path, right? Okay, keep me going. So, for example, like when it comes to meditation practice, some people, they still are very much directed by their concepts. Just like I was mentioning last time about how many of us are still driven by desire. You have a desire for get certain results, for example. You have to have, we all have an idea what, the result should be, what enlightenment should be, or what the path or experience should be, at least peace of mind anyway. But, how we experience that can be quite different. What is peace of mind? Does it mean just falling asleep? Or what is the experience when the thinking actually quiets down? Most of us only know peace of mind when the mind is off, right? When you're either asleep or maybe some kind of intoxication or some kind of distraction. You don't get lost in your thoughts when you're focusing on your favorite movie or something, huh? But as soon as movie's over, you're back to the old thinking again, the old patterns again. But the concepts, they have a purpose. But like the Buddha, he gave this threefold progression of wisdom. There's the Suttamaya Panya. That's what we hear. Sutta means hearing. So the Suttamaya Panya, the wisdom we hear about, so when you hear, Ajahn came a reading about was it life of Ajahn Chah or something? Is it Still Forest Pool or? Yeah. You hear that teaching, there's some wisdom there. Remember being with Ajahn Chah and hearing his talks, and they can be very inspiring. I mean, I could sit there and listen to his talks all night and not feel sleepy. Yeah, you'd be buzzed out. One night we gathered at his kuti, his little hut, where he was holding court, and I would just sort of sit there and just listen to all the interaction. I didn't really have any questions. Well, I probably did, but too frightened to ask them. Because you never know how he would answer. But I could sit there basically totally awake all night listening to him. One night we had the Patimokkha. So after the Patimokkha, he gave a talk. And he was also very, he was enlivened by his talk after the Patimokkha. So he came out in front of the Posada hall. I'm just sitting there on a chair. So people were talking to him, and then one of the Westerners had a question to ask him. So I was sitting there with another monk who were translating for him. And Ajahn Chah was talking away, and I was totally buzzed out. And then the bell rings for morning chanting at 3:00. Ding, ding, ding. Ajahn Chah said, "Oh, Jay," he said, "what happened to the night? Where did the time go?" He said, I should be sleepy. I should be tired," he said, or something like that. But then one night we went there, and then he just, for some reason, he said, "Okay, tonight retiring early. So there'll be no kind of group meeting tonight. I'll retire early." So I was a bit disappointed. So I headed back to my hut at 6:00, 7:00. And every step I took away from Ajahn Chah, I got more and more tired. I got back to my hut at 7:00 and fell asleep. And I realized this is dangerous. I'm feeding off Ajahn Chah's energy, I'm not developing my own energy. I need him there to kind of inspire me or give me this inspiration from his teaching, you see. So, I mean, he's not going to be around forever, as we know, he isn't. So realize, I've got to, slowly withdraw my attachment or my addiction to his teachings, you see, and develop my own practice, develop my own strength. So it wasn't that easy, Sometimes it's easier to sit with an inspiring teacher and but you're just borrowing their wisdom, even though it is a kind of wisdom. You're actually borrowing it. I realize I'm just borrowing Ajahn Chah's wisdom. I haven't got any myself. It's not my own wisdom. It's just his. And somebody would say, and what about this? I say, well, Ajahn Chah says. What do you think? I don't know. Ajahn Chah says. I don't know what I think because I haven't had time to think or contemplate her experience. Remember, there's one teacher in Thailand, Ajahn Buddha Dhamma, and he wrote many books, even translated to English. So it was very easy, just when you're feeling a bit bored or a bit confused, just pick up one of his books, and they're very inspiring. He talks very, very high Dhamma, we say, very inspiring, high teachings, And so, but there were some of the monks I noticed in his monastery. They just recited him all the time. Ajahn Buddha Dhamma said this, Ajahn Buddha Dhamma said that. And they themselves were not, I would say personally, again, subjective, very wise. Some of them didn't behave very well. But they could quote these very profound things from Ajahn Buddha Dhamma, about emptiness and all this. But they themselves were not very empty. They were. But maybe it is a good start anyway, having somebody else inspire you to realize at least there is a possibility. I mean, that's what meeting Ajahn Chah was. He was a living example. It wasn't just teachings for 5th century BC India. It was something that could be practiced today and realized today by somebody who had enough, earnestness to practice. But then we need to develop our own. I mean, the second kind of wisdom, I think it's second, is what you think, is a chitta maya panya, how you reflect and contemplate yourself. But the highest kind of wisdom is bhavana maya panya, which is development. So when we develop the Eightfold Path, develop the spiritual practice, we have our own direct experience. And this is something like, you won't forget the teachings of Ajahn Chah. We hear them, but if you don't live them, you soon will forget them too. And the same what you think about yourself, when you contemplate yourself. I mean, sometimes you can get some better ideas if you contemplate, but still it's not a direct experience. It hasn't really, as the Thais would say, enter the heart. They don't khao chai. It hasn't really entered into your heart. It's still in your head somewhere. And then as you get older and your brain starts to fail, what was that profound teaching again? Back in 2021, I had that insight, I think. You have to kind of look in your spiritual scrapbook. Fortunately, we'll have talks like this recorded, right? So I can remember what I said. All those wise things I said, 2021. But sometimes, it's part of the practice too is continuing with these concepts, developing the Eightfold Path. But occasionally we should return to contemplate. What has our view really changed? Have we really seen clearly what this practice is? Just practically speaking, an example is something like, when we hear about morality, for example. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Yeah, well, originally, probably you had a very coarse idea of what morality was. I mean, just like the right speech. It's simplified as no lying, refraining from lying, right? But actually, you can refine it. There's 4 kinds of wrong speech. Wrong speech, untruthful speech, harsh speech, frivolous speech, and gossip. So we can refine that. And then what's harsh speech? What's lying speech? It's not just telling an outright lie. Like somebody came to me once and they asked me, they were a nurse, and they said to me, what do you do about the situation where somebody's dying, and they ask you, how am I doing? Do you tell them the truth? Or do you tell a white lie and say, oh, you're fine. And you can say, with your fingers crossed, You're doing fine for the moment. But actually you're going to die within 1 week or something. Well, I mean, if they are, what do you say? They have what do they call it? A life-threatening or a fatal diagnosis. You can get some idea roughly. They got so many weeks or months to live, maybe. But you don't want to tell them that, because then maybe they'd give up hope. It'd be hopeless, and then they might even have a heart attack and die right then. You see, so so all we can do is look at our intention. The kamma is the intention. You don't intend to lie, to tell them untruth, but we have to recognize the situation. So you can you say, oh, you're well, maybe you can't say you're doing fine and cross your fingers behind your back, because that's still obviously, but you have to look at the right context and say, well, yes, life is challenging, and we all have to go sometime. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people have experience can say it much better than I can, who were more diplomatic or something, But so it's not quite so simple when it comes to the direct experience, is it? You have the intention not to lie, but trying to apply it to life situations. I mean, it's not so easy sometimes. Then we come to one important thing I was just thinking about recently was about practice of meditation. Especially concentration meditation. Like right in the Eightfold Path, samadhi. Word actually is samadhi, not concentration. But does anybody know what samadhi means? Samadhi is a Pali word. So, but when I was first learned about Buddhism, I translated it as concentration. So I was quite stuck on the word concentration, and I realized, oh yes, we can all use concentration. But there's only one factor in right samadhi. Samadhi has actually 5 factors. They call them the jhana anga, the factors of jhana. There's 5 factors, not just, and one of them is ekaggata, one-pointedness, but it's only one of the factors. And sometimes it is, something which people have difficulty with. Certain people have difficulty with concentration. They're trying to focus on one thing, and they have a very busy mind. It's not so easy. And maybe it actually is counterproductive, because you're trying too hard, single-pointedly trying too hard, and not relaxing enough in the wider context of it. So one of the other factors in constant samadhi is 2 factors: piti sukha, rapture and well-being. That's part of developing samadhi too, you see. 2 of their factors. So sometimes maybe, rather than keep focusing on one-pointedness, if you work on well-being, various ways to develop well-being, or rapture, joy, bliss, that can also lead into concentration or samadhi. When I was traveling in, well, it was in south central Thai monasteries there. One of them was quite out in the hills, the mountains of Kanchan, near mountains of Burma. And one of the monks there was a keen meditator, so he'd heard about different teachers. And there was this one teacher around that area who apparently had been with Ajahn Chah in the early days, but he'd separated and gone and done his own practice. And he had a very, controversial way to approach samadhi. He approached it through piti, through rapture. And this was a bit, dramatically controversial. Because one of the symptoms of piti, rapture, is the body shaking. You get these rapture? Anybody know rapture? People start to vibrate. And this is not the Christian rapture. This is there are various symptoms of it. They say first there's goose flesh, you call it that. Goosebumps or something or other, and it's too late at night. And I mean, sometimes there is a kind of vibration in the body and things. So the people on this retreat here with this teacher, they would, one of the signs they're going to enter jhana, absorption, was that they'd start shaking like really, almost like epilepsy or something. Is it epilepsy? We start shaking? You have a seizure, yeah. So apparently it was quite dramatic. People would be sitting in the meditation hall and somebody would like they're having a fit, and then just stop and be deep in samadhi. So this monk and I were talking about this. I never heard of this before, but he was talking about it. And then the next day, 2 monks came from that center. Came to visit, came to stay there. So we were kind of, should we ask them? So anyway, one day we were down at the bathing place. We had to go down to the river to bathe. So we all just happened to meet from our little huts down there to bathe all at the same time. And these 2 monks were sitting there, and I think one of them was senior to me slightly. So they were sitting there kind of chatting, and then the other monk finally he said, "And how do you do that practice? What's this practice all about anyway?" And so this monk was just sitting there with his bathing cloth and his soap, and he just suddenly started vibrating. And then boop. He just sat there. He'd opened his eyes and said, I'm pretty good at this, he says. So I mean, I don't know if you want to try that. But it's you want to lead people? You want to lead people in that kind of practice? Okay. Yeah. In the rapture meditation or something, yeah. But anyway, he obviously, some of the monks anyway, some of the disciples anyway, could follow this path of piti, of rapture. See? And then they just could drop into this absorption. See? Where normally they say that a result of samadhi is this piti. Yeah? When you get different levels of samadhi, then this rapture comes up. Because it's like you're stepping outside your normal, you can say, self-identity, your sense of self, entering into this more universal emotion of rapture. Yeah, when the mind does quieten down, it's very, very exhilarating and very rapturous experience when you're free of your, wandering thoughts and worried thoughts. The mind is very peaceful. So anyway, another possibility is through sukha, through well-being, not just happiness, but well-being, which can be generated practically by metta practice, friendliness. If you actually consciously bring up the thought of well-being, may I be well, may I experience well-being, and then try to, using that concept, if you like, however you imagine well-being, and just try to tune into it directly. Well-being, what it was well-being for you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. When you feel, sitting here, nice warm fire, well-being to a certain degree. Maybe too well-being and you just fall asleep, but but you can bring up that well-being and try to fuel it, feed it, so that well-being begins to become, as it were, a more prominent theme in your life. And that can become a foundation for samadhi. When your mind is in experiencing well-being, it means that you don't have worry or fear or doubt, right? Yeah, if you have fear or doubt, it's not well-being, is it? So in order to experience well-being, you're free of the hindrances to a certain degree. I mean, if you have too much well-being, you fall asleep, it's not a hindrance. That's not quite well-being. It's comfort maybe, but it's not sukha as the Buddha, as a factor in samadhi. The other two factors of samadhi are vitakka vichara, which is thinking. Vitakka is thinking, and vichara is more investigation or sustained thought. And some people think, well, we shouldn't be, meditation, not thinking. But the Buddha also gave one of the themes of the Eightfold Path is right thought. Samma sankappa is right thought or aspiration, really. Right aspiration. So you can say that the Buddha is encouraging skillful thought. Skillful thoughts, wholesome thoughts, they are much more uplifting, you can say. And of course, the point is that when you start off vitakka, you can say it's used more in the sense of taking this meditation theme, like breathing. You focus your mind on it. You settle your mind on it. You bring it up as a concept first. Breathing, 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 breathing. And vichara means to sustain that thought on that one particular theme. Normally people find that very hard to do. They take up one theme and then the breathing gets a bit more challenging, so then they try something else. But keep up with it. You sustain that focus on the breathing, for example, and eventually the mind settles down with that. And then it becomes a seed for samadhi then. But to be able to think skillfully and hold your mind there, with a skillful thought, then to be able to sustain it now can become one-pointedness on that theme then. There was one, I think on my first retreat, long retreat, winter retreat I gave in Switzerland, there was one long-term meditator there. He'd been meditating for a long time, and before there were meditation teachers around. So he learned from a book. And this book was, I don't know if it was either badly written or the teacher didn't have much experience, but he remembers reading in this book, meditation is not thinking. So that was his main principle of meditation. You sit there and try and not think. But before we can recognize the absurdity of that, you try and not think, you're thinking about not thinking. So it's a real brain teaser or brain breaker. I don't know. But he didn't have much experience with teachers. He just read this, and so that's what he's trying to do. But on this retreat, I said after about 2 weeks, so the 3-month retreats, after about 2 weeks, I said, okay, now you can not focus on the breathing, just observe what's ever in your mind. And he realized he couldn't do that. He couldn't let go of meditation object because you start thinking again. And he realized that all this time he'd been, forcing his mind not to think. Then he remembered on some retreats, teachers had said, okay, now contemplate. Contemplate arising and passing away. And he realized he couldn't do that because that to him was thinking. You see? So he was sort of like, his mind was either on the breath or thinking, off the breath and thinking, one or the other. They couldn't use thinking in a skillful way. But that's what he'd learned from a book. And you can say, in a sense, the book wasn't quite totally wrong, because meditation is. I wouldn't say it's not thinking, but it's going beyond thought. But rather than think about not thinking, if you focus your vitakka on the breathing, for example, on one skillful object, you focus on that thought, if you like, breathing concept, enough, and the rest of the thoughts stop. And you follow it far enough, all the thoughts think, all the thoughts stop. All the thinking stops. And you have direct experience of the breath. First, it's just a concept. What am I doing? I'm breathing. But after a while, if you focus on it enough, then the ideas about it, the thinking about it, fades away, and there's just breath. Sometimes there's not anybody breathing. There just is breath. No breather, nobody thinking about it, just is breathing itself. It's a direct experience. And that's called one-pointedness then. So, but by focusing on a meditation object enough, then the thinking stops by itself. You don't need to try and force it to stop thinking. So in a way that the book wasn't quite wrong, but it wasn't quite right either. It was the wrong approach. So, I must admit, I did that too in the beginning. Tried to not think. And actually one time on a retreat, it sort of worked. And my mind was just wandering. And one day I just said, oh, shut up. And it did. The mind just stopped. And then I got frightened. I didn't know who I was if I'm not thinking. So it's identification with thinking. When it stopped, I didn't know who I was. Of course, if you develop mindfulness, the mindfulness is there. Mindfulness really is beyond thinking. It's direct experience, directly experienced sensation, feeling, states of mind. There's always something there. Without conceptualizing of it, without identifying with it, there just is experiencing feeling, experiencing sensation, experiencing state of mind, experiencing no thought. That was great for a moment. But now it's become more familiar. So I can just be aware of no thinking. It does happen sometime, usually before falling asleep. But maybe if you watch that, if you're aware of yourself falling asleep, you can notice too how the thinking has to kind of tone down, slow down, you see. If you're still thinking, you can't sleep. But if you're observing that process, the thinking gets cloudier and cloudier and slower, and then, oops, I'm awake. Now it's 3 hours later. Oh. But to move from the concepts to the direct experience sometimes requires a certain amount of, you can say, certain creativity. It's like moving our practice to a different dimension now. And normally we still are very much addicted to or stuck on or reliant on concepts. And it's hard to make that adjustment, but recognizing that those are only signposts. It's not the direct experience yet, only pointing at the experience. What is one-pointedness of mind? What is well-being? What is, let's say, mindfulness, full presence of mind? What is it really like? What's that experience beyond the concept? So if we open to that, our practice takes on a different dimension, as it were, then into the experiential dimension. Then we get a real understanding of what the Buddha was talking about. The Buddha was talking from his experience, not from his concepts, talking from his experience. That's why his words have such meaning. He's talking like from real reality, the way things really are. He wasn't just talking about concepts, could be this and could be that. He's talking about the way things really are. That's why his teaching so resonates today, I think. People can recognize, oh, yeah, this is right. This is true. Even though I don't, it isn't my, deep and prolonged experience, but it does resonate somehow. Yes, right. So sometime in our practice, it's helpful to reevaluate sometimes. Are we still relying on those old concepts? Or still old perceptions or ideas? Or has, what bhavana, my opinion, means, bhavana means development. Has our understanding developed? Or we still have a very childish view of spiritual practice? So we have the directions and the guidance and put it into practice, and we arrive at, just like, there's assigned points to the place. We travel on that route. We have to go through the experience, and whether it's what we thought it was or not, we just keep going with it, and we arrive there, okay, this is what it's really like. That's what the Buddha's pointing us towards, so hopefully you'll be able to realize it for yourself.